everybody. Matt Sweetwood here with my weekly show. I want to talk a little bit about the show itself this week. First of all, we're beginning on a different day today because this Sunday is actually Father's Day. And when Father's Day is on a Sunday, and I have my kids coming in actually to spend Father's Day with me, I want to actually free that time up and spend with them. I'm actually really excited. I find Father's Day to be really rewarding like that, considering, my relationship with my kids. And, it's a special day, obviously, as a single father. Father's Day, even has more importance. But I'll tell you a little anecdote before I get to today's show is that I never let my kids buy me a gift. I have a very big thing about not allowing gift giving for my kids because I sort of have everything that I want. I'm a man who doesn't really like possessions. I don't really like a man who doesn't really like possessions. I don't really like whoop, we had a little bit of a feedback there. But anyway, like I said, I don't really like to get gifts. I don't really want anything. What I always say to my kids is, I want you to show up, go to dinner so we can spend some time together. I'll pay for dinner. Doesn't really matter. But if you want to get me something, I just want a note or a handwritten card. I don't need stuff. I don't need my kids. So, in many cases, you're still supporting a little bit here and there. We don't actually want gifts from them. And anyway, those of you that actually follow me, I actually have changed the name and sort of the way I want to direct the show, in that I'm calling the show the Big Life Show. I was calling it, Sunday Night with Matt Sweetwood, and I had a couple of versions of it, but I really have taken the first few shows as an opportunity to formulate the what's the right word? The direction of the show, exactly how I wanted to phrase things to really position the show. And so we're going to call it the Big Life Show. And I want to be your big life hacker, the guy who's going to give you those hacks that are going to help you have a big life. And I use the term big life a lot. It's the name of the show. And what I mean is that's a life that's happier, it's more productive, it's more fulfilling, and it's one that you're going to love living. And we're going to deal with topics like relationships and dating and marriage and divorce, parenting, spirituality a little bit, and wellness. And actually tonight, I want to do a topic that's on parenting. And this is a topic, it's related to parenting, but it's also related to your own spiritual well-being and your own happiness. And that's self-esteem. And the topic tonight really is about parents' self-esteem. And this is not a trivial issue. When you have children, particularly I did at a young age, you don't know what you're doing. It adds a whole dimension to the relationship. Sometimes it can be a daunting task. In fact, a lot of the times managing children can be a daunting task. They don't exactly hand out children's certificates. There's not children lessons you can take. It can be a little overwhelming from a financial perspective, from a time perspective, from a just an emotional perspective, and it can be very overwhelming. And as a result, your self-esteem can suffer. And why does that really matter? Because ultimately, self-esteem in yourself is going to translate into your children. And before I really get into the depth of that, let me share a little bit of an anecdote with you from when I had my children. They were little. My children are all in their 20s now, as many of you know who follow me, and they're full grown. But when I first was taking care of my children, and this goes back to the late 1990s, my children were young. Actually, when their mom left us, my youngest was 18 months, the oldest was 8. And when you're thrown into a situation like that, your self-esteem is really struggling. In my case, I lost my wife. I was in a pretty bad emotional state, in that, you know, your relationship has failed, your marriage has failed. All of a sudden, I have kids to take care of that I didn't necessarily plan on taking care of. The responsibility was beyond overwhelming. The financial burdens were overwhelming. I didn't know how I was going to manage it. Actually, at that time, I really was not in good physical condition. I don't look like I do right now. I was very overweight. I was emotional eating. I was doing things that really were not very good for me. And as a result, I had very low self-esteem. And when I had these kids to take care of, what I ended up doing was saying, okay, what do I do? I started looking at the moms around town. I started looking at the other kids in town, and I tried to emulate what they were doing. You know, taking care of them in the same way. I would look at the moms. How are they taking care of the kids? How would they treat the kids? What were they doing with the children? And one of the things I talk about, I actually wrote an article on this. It was an article on "There's no friggin' way I'm taking them to Chuck E. Cheese." I actually just recently redid that article about parenting and self-esteem, and it's really about the day I decided that I was going to parent like a man. And I remember there was a birthday party. I actually don't really think it was one of my kids' birthday parties. You have to remember, I'm going back to 1997. Long time ago, right? 20 years ago. Amazing. Just pause on that a sec. It's hard to believe 20 years later. Wow. Anyway, it was 1997, and I had all of my kids with me because whatever the babysitting, my nannies, whatever the situation was, it was a difficult situation for me to manage. But I didn't have my nannies with me, and I had taken all of the kids with me to a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. It was for one of their friends. I think it was my middle daughter, and who was like 5 or 6 years old. So I show up at this Chuck E. Cheese. I remember it was on Route 10 in East Hanover, New Jersey. It's a highway. If you know New Jersey, it's just mall, 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 tons of traffic and stuff like that. We pull into the Chuck E. Cheese. We go into the Chuck E. Cheese. The place is just swarming with children. There's probably 4 birthday parties going on, or 4 parties of some kind going on at the same time, filled with kids running around and screaming. Your feet are sticking to the floor. The place smells like stale pizza and spilled soda and urine. I don't know. It's got a very bad smell to it. The moms are sitting there, all clutchy together, talking to each other, looking at me like I'm from Mars in there. And my daughter, who's with us, having a good time at the birthday party. The older kids are a little bit upset at this point to even be dragged along to a birthday party with their younger sister, and they're running around all over the place. And I am just as miserable as it gets. And, since we're talking about self-esteem, I'm sitting in a place where I don't even feel like I belong. I'm not sure that I can handle this parenting thing. You can imagine the overwhelming feeling that you get from this kind of circumstance. And I sat there and I said, if I'm going to do this for another 20 years, I'm going to raise these kids another 15 or 20 years, I'm not going to survive if I'm going to do that. And I vowed at that particular moment that I was never, ever going to go to Chuck E. Cheese again. And I think I actually held to that promise. And what I ended up doing was I said, okay, I need to do something with my children, that's going to be entertaining for them, something we can do together. And, I'm condensing kind of the ideas into one, because I was doing a lot of other things with the children that really weren't my thing, in terms of how I was parenting them and so on. And what I ended up doing, funny enough, was going out and buying seasons tickets to the Devils hockey team, New Jersey Devils. And we became really big hockey fans because that was something I like to do. And I said, look, the kids are going to have to do what I like to do. I just can't make this happen. And so we ended up doing that. And now we sit here 20 years later and we go to games together still. And it's a really good article. You should go on my website and read the article. I have pictures of them when they were little and when they were older. And it became a family bonding thing. It was something I enjoyed. It was something we got into. But the point being is it allowed me to parent like a man. In my mind, what a man did for me, not this kind of thing that, and I'm not trying to say anything that's sexist because I can flip this around and say it for a single mom. You don't have to do the things that dads do with your children in order for the children to be okay or for you to be okay. You want to do things that actually, you can survive, you can do. And what I slowly started to realize, and this is really, at the heart of the matter, is that I did things that I was more comfortable with. I did things that fit better into the mold of what I wanted to do. And as a result, I became more confident. My self-esteem grew, and I started to notice the really important point is that I started to notice that the kids started to function better. And I realized that there was a relationship, okay? A relationship between ultimately the way that I acted and the confidence that I showed and the confidence and the self-confidence that my children had. And this was really almost an epiphany in the parenting because I was able to translate that to other areas. In other words, if I treated people well, I noticed that my children treated people well. And so it's a little bit of, you've heard this expression before, kids don't do as you say, they do as you do. But it's even deeper than that, is they actually take from you the cues of your personality. Well, some character traits, at least tendencies, we think or have genetic factors. I believe that the lion's share of attitudes that you have, they're learned. And as I'm pointing out, the most significant influence you can have on a child's attitude is even greater than their genetic makeup. I always say, and one of the things that I say is that things are a third, a third, a third, in terms of raising children. I've said this that when I, counseled other parents who've had children that have done not so good things in their lives, and the parents whose children have excelled very well who are taking credit for that. I always say it's not really your fault. It's like a third, a third, a third. A third being, genetics. If the two parents are nuclear physicists, the likelihood of the child being not necessarily a nuclear physicist, but the child from a college and being academically gifted are high. And the reverse of that is true. So 1/3 really, there is a genetic, if both parents are high strung, the child is likely to be like that. Both parents relax, likely. The other third is really the part that you impart to the child, which comes from the way you are, the way you treat them. You treat them with respect, you treat other people with respect, they're going to have respect. And the other third, I hate to tell you all, is either dumb luck if you're not a believer or just God's intervention, just the way it's going to be. So as a parent, when you gave birth to them, when they're born, 1/3 is set. As a parent, you can control 1/3, and the rest is really just how it's going to turn out. A psychologist, actually, I don't know who said this, but they said that, and this is at the heart of what we're talking about today, is that if you give your child self-confidence, you've given him everything. And if you've not given your child self-confidence, then regardless of what you've given him, a good education, you've taught him manners, it doesn't matter what you teach him, you've given him nothing. I want to repeat that because to me, this is something that I learned relatively early on. And I believe that's why I think that I have children that are, have gone out into the world as adults. And that is really the thing that I've given them. So they say that if you've given a child self-confidence, then you've given him everything. If you've not given your child self-confidence, then regardless of whatever else you have given him, you've given him nothing. And so I guess the crucial question to ask, and this is something I want you to listen to carefully, is what should parents do to give their child, how do they help their child develop self-confidence? And the answer is that self-esteem and self-confidence are contagious. Parents who feel secure about themselves are going to convey that attitude of security and self-confidence to their children. Parents who are insecure, they're anxiety-ridden, they're not likely to foster self-confidence in their children, regardless of how many parenting books they've absorbed, no matter what techniques they use, no matter where they take their children, what schools they put them in, SAT prep, all of that stuff. So if the parents conduct their lives, go through lives with confidence, then It's going to be absorbed by the children. And with so much else, the place to begin with is with ourselves. So by far, the most effective way to instill a positive sense of self-awareness in our children is by developing our own sense of self-awareness, which will lead both to the discovery of our strengths and skills, and it'll reveal deficits even, or things that you need to correct. And so parents not only transmit their self-esteem when they exhibit that, the children can also benefit by observing how we achieve these feelings or how we correct things in ourselves. This is like a really deep, deep secret of having a big life, of doing something that is going to fundamentally change your children's lives in the most positive way. And I'm going to sort of repeat that, or sort of rephrase it in another way, is you begin with yourself. You want to be self-aware. You want to develop those strengths of character traits that lead you to grow. And your children are going to watch that in you. Particularly if you improve as a human being, your children will watch you improve. They will watch you grow. They will watch how you solve problems. They will watch you go from somebody who maybe is a little anxious to somebody who is more self-confident. And that process of them observing you, and if you don't think children are watching you, anybody who has children knows they watch everything you do. Even if they don't say it or they don't repeat it at that time, they watch everything you do. And they also watch how you problem solve, sometimes those deep issues. And they're going to appreciate you more for that, but most of all, they're going to absorb that. So you can see that the building of self-esteem in a parent is a very, very fundamental and important concept in your own self-growth and for the growth of your children. And I'll liken back to my story again. In the case of my story, I really lacked self-confidence probably for the first half a year or year that I had the children with me. And I can remember back how much harder things were. The children were more agitated. They didn't follow direction as well. Think of it yourself. You know, you can all remember when you went to class and the substitute teacher was in class. That substitute teacher did not command respect. They did not. And that's because the teacher wasn't confident. They didn't feel like they had authority. And so as a parent, when you're the same way, you create that in your children. But when you're strong and you're self-confident, the children absorb that from you. They follow your instruction. They themselves gain confidence. They gain self-esteem. And when you learn to fix those things that are wrong with you, I'll give you a really concrete example of that. When I had eating problems, I was overeating, I was eating unhealthy. It's logical to know that my children were like that. But as my children have watched me over the years and the decades battle with the difficulties that I had with eating and getting myself in shape, they watched how I approached the problems. And I can watch in each of my children how they've absorbed the problem-solving techniques that I've gotten actually in overcoming that. And they themselves incorporate that in their eating and their exercise regimens. I've watched how they approach work. I've always been a very, very hard worker in my life. I've worked hard at every aspect from raising them, and in my businesses, I ran tough businesses. And I've watched how those skills that I've exhibited really manifested myself in them. You know, I'm a speaker. I go out and I'm a professional speaker. And I've watched how my children, who many of them shy, when they've had opportunities, I've watched how not that they are great speakers, they are great speakers, but I've watched how they've gained the confidence by watching how I've gained confidence in going out and learning how to speak. I have one of my kids who's actually turned into a writer like I am, and I've watched how he's built his confidence in his voice. And that's, I'm sure, has learned from how I've done the same. When I first started writing, I was really kind of a sucky writer. And as time has gone on, I've become a much better writer, and now I'm published on many platforms. I have a book coming out. And I've learned those things, and I've watched how he's developed his writing skill, and you kind of smile when you see he's applying some of the same techniques that I have. And then this is going to repeat itself like everything else in life. So my kids are now all in their 20s. One of them is married. I'm sure very soon, despite my youthful appearance, I'm going to have grandchildren. And you're going to want them to have learned that confident high level of self-esteem, because what do you want? You want them to transmit that on to your grandchildren. And you can see how the cycle will continue to repeat itself. So I really want to emphasize this topic again. I want to talk about, hey Magali, hey Lacole, I see I've got some of my fans on. How you guys doing tonight? So I want to emphasize this again. And sometimes this is really hard as a parent. You go through difficulties in life. You have weaknesses. And, it's not that you want to hide, and I want to make this point too. It's not that you want to hide your weaknesses from your children. It's okay for your children to see your weaknesses. What it is you want them to see how you overcome your weaknesses and you gain self-confidence. Yeah, Virak. So Virak asked a question. Would I do something differently as a father back then if I could turn back the time? Yeah. And the answer to that question sort of relates to the story that I told you with respect to Chuck E. Cheese. That probably happened almost a year into the time when I had my children. As a matter of fact, I think it was almost a year, because I'm thinking the mom left when it was October, November, and that was probably, near my middle daughter's birthday, so it was probably a year later. I went through a year just being a confidence mess. And when I look back on it, it was really silly. If I really had looked at other parents, I would see that they all struggled with a lot of the things that I did, but I just didn't have that. And I think that if I entered that with a little more belief in myself, and I think that belief should come from a spiritual side. God never gives you more than you can handle. Everybody has heard this expression. If you're not a believer in God, life doesn't give you more than you can handle. And if I really walked around with that, I would have been like, you got this, be confident. I certainly was a confident business person. I had no problem, managing 120 employees. What the heck is 5 kids if you're managing 120 employees in an impossible business? So I think that I wish I had more faith in myself and more faith in the universe and God, that it wasn't going to give me more than I can handle. And I wouldn't have suffered. I probably suffered for a year. And as a result of my suffering, I really believe that my kids suffered. They saw a father who was there, and I want to say in this case, a father who was their everything. I was their only parent. They didn't have a mom. In fact, mom was interacting with them on a very infrequent basis at that point in a way that was not good for them. So they had mom wigging out to them, acting erratically. They had dad walking around like he didn't know what he was doing. Dad was miserable because he was trying to be mom instead of dad. And it was just a really bad circumstance. So what I do regret ultimately is that I didn't trust in the experience. I didn't trust in myself. And I took a year of suffering that I didn't really need to do. And in a way, I inflicted that on my children. And that's really what I would do differently. And, I've taken that lesson into life. Actually, I've said this to other people who are working with me, right, Virak, is that, when you're faced with a really tough circumstance, you just say to yourself, I'm not going to get more than I can handle. I'm just not. I'm not going to get more than I can handle. And, you say, you got this. And if you exhibit that confidence, it spreads all around you. And so back to the crucial question. The crucial question is, what do parents do to help their child develop self-confidence? And that is learn self, be self, have self-esteem yourself. Self-esteem is contagious. Build your own self-esteem. A parent that feels secure about their attitude is going to convey that attitude of security and self-confidence to their children, and on and on and on. And remember, no matter what you do for your child, no matter what, you can teach them anything. Teach them 8 languages, teach them karate, travel the world with them, give them the absolute best education that you can. But if you don't give your child self-confidence, everything else is going to fall by the wayside. They're going to go out into the world and make bad decisions about relationships, which I did as a child, as a young man or young adult. They're going to make bad decisions, or they're going to underachieve, which to me is one of the greatest sins that you can have as a parent, have committed, is if your child ends up underachieving from lack of confidence, right? Because there's no greater waste than seeing your beautiful child out there who you think has, or has all of these talents, and is underachieving. That's actually extremely painful in my mind as a parent. And if you don't give your child that high level of self-esteem, you don't build that and foster that in through your self-esteem, they're going to underachieve. And worse things can happen. They can choose friends that are beneath them, get themselves into trouble, all sorts of, it's really that low self-esteem is really a bad road that the child gets on. And once they get on that road is really hard to get off of. In my case, and I'm not blaming my parents, I had very low self-esteem. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't until middle age that I was able to get off of that bad path and get myself in a place where my self-confidence and my self-esteem are in a place where I can actually make healthy decisions about my life. So I think the takeaway from this is that for all of you out there, if you're a prospective parent, if you are a parent, is that you want to try to do things that enhance your self-esteem. If you're parenting in a way that's making you uncomfortable, don't. Do things that actually you believe in. Don't do them because other people do them. Do things that are going to build you up. Put yourself in really good physical condition. As a parent or as anything, I always find for me, physical conditioning and feeling good about my physical appearance and my body and my health build self-esteem. I want to participate and engage with people that don't put me down. If you're around negative people, people that have problems, people that put you down, your self-esteem is going to suffer. So you want to be around that. You want to do things in your life that help other people. Because when you help other people, like do charity, get involved in nonprofits, help another human being, another individual, that is actually going to help build your self-esteem. You want to have a positive attitude on life, and a lot of that, and this is something I speak about all the time, and that's gratitude. If you sit there and you just think about all of the really positive things in your life, and when I look at it from a self-esteem perspective, if you look at it from the things that you've accomplished in your life, if I go back once again to my circumstance, I was sitting there thinking that I was a mess. I couldn't handle this. But if I looked at what I achieved to that point, I graduated college with highest honors in mathematics. I had a graduate degree in theoretical mathematics. I was running a successful business. I was accomplished in many, many other ways. I was a championship golfer at that time. I had almost achieved my black belt in karate. I had done lots of things which I could have drawn on. I had a lot of people who thought highly of me. There were a lot of things that I could have drawn on to build my self-esteem and grow it even better, but I focused on the negative things. I wasn't grateful for what I had. Once I started to become grateful and started to acknowledge those things and realize those things in myself, my self-esteem started to build, and my entire life really started to turn around in a very, very positive way. So the lesson for today, do the things that build your self-esteem, do the things that build your self-confidence. That's going to transmit to your children and your grandchildren and on, and more likely your children and yourself are going to head down a path towards having a big life. And ultimately, that's what this show is about. I'm calling it the Big Life Show, and I want to give you these hacks. What I gave you today was really a deep hack. It wasn't like a little quick one, like reduce your carbs as you go through the day because it's going to make you healthier. It's going to keep your weight under control. No, this is a big one. This is one that requires a lifetime of work, a lifetime of effort, and you have to continuously do it and practice it so self-esteem becomes a habit. And if you continue to watch the show as we go through the weeks, I don't know when the time's going to be. We're going to play around with the time a little to maximize our viewership. I promise I'm going to give you the life hacks that are going to help you have a big life. And for you, that means a life that's happier, more productive, more fulfilling, and one you're going to love living instead of just sort of walking through life. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to wish all the dads and moms out there, why not, have a happy Father's Day. If you're a single mom, you know, Father's Day, if the dad's not around, that's the day you should get a little bit of celebration. For the dads out there, both single and regular dads, don't be forced into doing things you don't want to do because dads end up in that circumstance. Make sure you communicate with your family what you want. In my case, no gifts, dinner, get together, give me a card, that's it. And Have a happy, joyous, and most of all, meaningful Father's Day. And we'll see you on the Big Life Show next week. And everybody, make it a big week.